The Franco-Prussian War is one of these less covered conflicts on this channel. Not anymore, because in this video we're going to talk about the Siege of Strasbourg, which happened in 1870. The Germans laid siege around the city of Strasbourg and countless of people died, and it caused widespread destruction. It was a bitter foretaste of what total war was going to look like. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, I'm Steegh and I'm a Dutch history teacher. I cover history preferably on location, and I'm now on location in front of a monument that commemorates the Siege of Strasbourg, which happened in 1870. Let's discuss how this siege came to be and how it came to an end.
This war erupted due to aggressive foreign policy from both France and Prussia. France, by that time, had an emperor, Napoleon III, nephew of the former emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. Just like the first French emperor, Napoleon III had also great aspirations to dominate the European continent. However, during the 1860s, his popularity declined. The population was fed up with his authoritarian style of governance. Hoping to boost his image, he wanted to achieve new international successes. Yet his 1861-67 Mexican adventure, where he sent an army to Mexico and installed Emperor Maximilian I on the throne, became a failure. His troops withdrew from Mexico and Emperor Maximilian was executed. Meanwhile, he looked at Prussia, which became more powerful. The Prussian king Wilhelm I strived for military reinforcement of his nation. These policies were carried out by a conservative chancellor, Otto von Bismarck. In two short wars against Denmark and Austria, Bismarck established the North German Confederation. Napoleon III saw Prussia as a serious threat and wanted to annex Belgium and Luxembourg or the Rhineland-Palatinate. Bismarck declined and threatened that if it would come to war, it would be one likes of the which has never been seen before. And war did break out. The direct cause was the Ems dispatch, where, in short, Bismarck released a statement to the press that stirred up emotions in both countries. And so, war between France and the North German Confederation, alongside with German states, was a fact. On the 2nd of August 1870, the opening shots of the war were fired. The French chassepot rifles proved superior to the German Dreise needle gun. Also, the French made use of the mitrailleuse that could fire over 100 rounds per minute. At Saarbrücken, the French were successful, but with superior artillery, the Germans drove the French back at Wissembourg. At Spicheren and Wuth, the Germans also proclaimed victory. Before the war, the Germans had done extensive research of the French terrain. As the Germans moved toward Metz, another group went for Strasbourg.
Strasbourg was seen as the strongest fortress cities. In the past, the city had seen numerous conflicts, such as the Roman Wars, as well as the 16th century wars of religion, and also the Napoleonic Wars. Now the Germans wanted to seize the city because of its symbolic importance. On the 12th of August, elements from the Baden Field Division that were supported by the Württembergish artillery arrived at the city. As rail and telegraph lines were cut, the Germans laid siege on the city. Inside Strasbourg, there were 85,000 civilians, 15,000 French soldiers, and 1,200 obsolete guns. The French forces' military governor of the city was Jean-Jacques Uhrich, and he led the French forces. Now, the French didn't expect that Strasbourg would be attacked, so therefore there were no preparations to withstand a siege. But as soon as the Germans arrived, proper preparations were made. And Strasbourg may have been blessed with its fortifications surrounding the city, but do notice that by this time, these fortifications were obsolete. See, the city had, for example, no outer fortress rings, meaning that because of the lack of outer fortifications, the Germans were able to bring their cannons close to the city in order to bombard it. German commander General August von Werder, he believed that Strasbourg would surrender after just a few cannon shots. But he was mistaken. See, the city was symbolically important to the French, and city commander Uhrich, he was willing to fight it out till the bitter end. On the 15th of August, the Germans start shelling the city with their heavy artillery guns. As civilians fled to their cellars, many buildings in the city caught fire. At the German side, this was more a period of time investing in placing the artillery in the right positions. And interesting enough, German newspapers didn't really cover this siege. Not more than one paragraph in the German newspapers appeared about the Siege of Strasbourg. Yet the German shelling led to widespread international condemnation. On the 24th of August, von Werder, he started with heavy nighttime bombardments. Large parts of the city center were destroyed by the German artillery barrages. The French still did not surrender, and therefore von Werder switched to more traditional warfare, where he aimed to destroy the fortifications of the city in order to take the city by storming it.
This regular siege, so called for following the rules, during which shells and bombs fell day and night, lasted for a month. In total, over the course of 44 days between August 15th and September 27th, the Germans sent 193,722 projectiles into Strasbourg, an average of one every 20 seconds.
As cultural and sacred objects, such as the new church, were turned into ashes, some people believed that day of last judgment had arrived. Others believed that humanity was thrown back 2 centuries to the times of the 30 Years' War. The Germans made preparations to take the city by storming it, but this would most likely result into a costly attack. The French on several occasions did try to attack the German positions, but without much success. The French did manage to inundate the southern part of the city. The shelling destroyed large parts of the fortifications of Strasbourg. On September 11th, the Swiss Red Cross was allowed to evacuate the elderly, the sick, and the wounded. And it was then that the inhabitants of Strasbourg learned about the current stance, the Franco-Prussian War.
They learned that at Sedan, Napoleon III had been captured, and in Paris the Third Republic had been proclaimed. French commander Uhrich now knew there was no point in holding out, but he refused to give in. Later that month, Frederick I, Grand Duke of Baden, sent him a personal letter urging him to surrender on humanitarian grounds. Since the outer walls had been breached on several spots, the Germans made themselves ready to storm the city. However, on the 27th of September, Uhrich decided to surrender, and the next day the city was handed to the Germans. After 44 days of bombardment, nearly every edifice in the city had been damaged. The prefecture, the art museum, the theater, the new church, and the Protestant gymnasium were gone. The Hôtel de Ville, the Citadel, and the train station suffered extensive damage. The French suffered 562 dead soldiers and 341 dead civilians. Altogether, almost 20,000 wounded. The Germans suffered 170 killed in action, 715 wounded in action, and 44 missing in action. When in 1894, Pastor Wilhelm Hornung published his diary, he opened with a message to his children which stated, "May the younger generation that is so fortunate not to have experienced war learn from these pages the horrors of war."
And little did he know, because in 1914 the First World War broke out with much more destruction. If you're interested in that, you want to learn about the First World War, well, I have a playlist for you right here. If you want to support me, you can go to my Patreon page. You can also support me via PayPal. The links are in the description. I want to thank you for watching. Leave a comment, leave a like, and au revoir and auf Wiedersehen from Strasbourg, France.